Yeah, we're ready to go.
All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 28th, 2021 Public Safety Committee meeting. Roll call, please.
Chairman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman Ebling,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims,
Here.
Alderman Plufka, absent at the moment.
Yes, join us soon. I'll move on to approval of the agenda. If there's, if it's all right, can we approve by acclamation? Anyone object to that? All right. So moving on to citizen comments. Kelly, anyone attending?
We do. Randy and Sandy would like to speak.
Okay. Randy, Sandy, you out there?
I think so.
Yes.
Me? Great. Hi, Randy and Sandy Delo, 9134 Pine Avenue. First, I want to say thank you to Bola and Dan for sending me the information to register or submit a request for a, I keep calling it a speed hump. I know you have a different name for it, but for our block, yes. And we, I believe I did submit everything. And Dan, I think you acknowledged that you do have it all. Is that correct? Okay, so I am just attending tonight. I had a couple quick questions. We've got a ton of construction on our street right now, which is, you'd think would slow some of the traffic down. It's amazing. People still fly through. But will you notify myself, or I don't know, I don't think you notify everybody on the block once you start to look at this? I don't know when the process begins.
You kind of cut out on me, Randy, but we are taking it up later on in new business.
Oh, okay.
Dan's got a report for us on that subject. So if you want to stick around and listen, you can.
Okay. So, all right. I didn't think it'd be coming up this soon. That's why I was checking to see when the process begins.
It's begun.
Okay. I'll try to see if I can mute. Oh, there it is. Mute myself. Thanks.
Karen Smith also has her hand raised.
Karen?
Hi, I also have traffic mitigation request form that was submitted. I submitted a form a week or so ago. It was form I need to get 2/3 of I guess, people that are impacted. So I'm not really sure how you look at that, given that it's a kind of like the school is part of the area that's impacted, and then we've got a lot of houses that actually like don't face high school. But I did get a bunch of signatures, and I'm just following up to make sure that you got those, to see if those are enough, and then also to understand the process. I know after planning, or no, I guess it was the Board of Aldermen meeting where this was taken up and you all approved the curb cut. I know some of the neighbors as well as myself are interested in knowing kind of like what the next steps are to see if we can look at how we'll mitigate traffic issues once the school curb cut is put in. Thank you.
You're welcome, Karen. It too is on the agenda under new business, so we'll take it up at that time. Anybody else, Kelly?
That's it at this time.
Move on to city administrator report. Anything, Bola?
Yes, I want to report that the city, with the help of Chief Spees, Janet Levy, and Kelly, we have put on the city's website under administration, which is the city clerk, city administrator page. We have put up what is called compliance with Senate Bill 5. And we are required to put this on the city's website and update this annually. And what it does is it says that we have gone through a process to adopt the budget. We reference the ordinance number and a link to where the budget is. We also indicate that the city's finance has been audited, and we list the name of the audit firm. and the audit report, and that is also on the city website. We list the type of financial software that we use, and then the limits of all the city's level of insurance, from police professional liability to workers' comp to public officials, omissions and error, and where any of these documents can be found if anyone has request for it. So I'll also include this in the city administrator weekly report that goes out this Friday, but I just wanted you all to know that the city is in compliance with SB 5.
Thank you, Bola. Move on to reports of chair and alderman. I have one thing. As the board took up last Monday, the curb cut, it was good to know that the city was going to, at that crosswalk between Harrison and the school, do some improvements with type of signage and lights like we have at Strassner and across Mcknight. But I also kind of noticed, and I think the city can take this up, that our school zones aren't really well marked, and the signage really hasn't been updated. For the school zones around the high school, the middle school, and both elementary schools. And I've included some pics in there of Avery School over in Webster on some of the improved signage they have in their school zones. So I would like to direct Dan to put on his traffic engineer hat and maybe at a future meeting come back to us with some improved signage suggestions. But I just wanted to float this by the committee first to see if you'd all be in favor of directing staff to do so. Does anybody care either way?
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Pat, is that all right with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, Dan, I'll get with you on what's in my head on some possible ideas, and then maybe we can bring it back to a meeting next month. All right, that's all I had. Alderman Plufka is not here. Alderwoman Eppeling, anything?
No, I don't have any reports.
Okay. Alderwoman Sims?
No report.
All right, we'll move on to item number 6 is department reports, and we'll start with fire. Chief Cottrell?
Thank you. I'll just give a brief report where we're at currently. Next week, Sunday, actually, we have 4 members of our department going to South Bend, Indiana for a pretty unique opportunity. It's for Swiftwater, called Indiana River Rescue School. So it's Swiftwater and boat operator training. We've sent 4 people previous years to this school. The unique opportunity is this year, all the students are coming from St. Louis County fire departments. So as we work together, these students are going to be receiving the same training at the same time. So really a unique opportunity coordinated by a few departments in St. Louis County. So we're happy to participate with that. We continue to administer COVID vaccine shots, including the homebound program. Obviously, numbers are declining of those requesting vaccines, but we still have plenty available, and we want to push it out to anybody that's seeking the vaccine. So we'll continue to push that out. I hope maybe you can talk tomorrow with coffee with the mayor, perhaps, and do some social media pushes as well. A new program that just started.
Should be there. I saw him.
Cardinal Glennon Children's Hospital through a grant with their safety program provided some bicycle helmets to the fire department. We could hand out to children in need. And it's all through a grant program, so no cost to the city of Brentwood. Our staffing levels are in really good shape right now. The firefighter returned from an injury that required surgery. He's doing well. We're just down to 1 firefighter with his illness due to COVID. The delivery of our new ambulance has been pushed back somewhat, at least a week to my knowledge. And it's due to a Ford recall. So our dealer is making sure the Ford recall is performed prior to us going and picking it up. So we don't have to deal with that ourselves. But it should be ready any day. And then in conclusion, we're continuing to evaluate for the assistant position. We conducted interviews last week. We made some cuts and we're moving some individuals forward for some additional rounds of interviews. Look forward to completing this by mid-May. That completes the fire department report.
All right. Any questions for Chief Cottrell? And then I know we've got your RFP for ballistic vests coming up later in the agenda. Thank you, Chief. Move on to Public Works. Dan?
Yeah, I have two updates on streetlights. One in particular is Brentwood Forest. So since the last meeting, we actually do have information from Ameren. It's just under $13,000 is how much the cost would be for the lights themselves. And then we already knew the cost with Reinhold to put in the conduit. So we're looking at 5 streetlights at a little over $30,452. So Reinhold's going to call locates in and get that lined up for the bores in May. And then I included the little drawing so you can kind of see where they're going. You know, that's part of your packet. You can see where those 5 lights are proposed. And then it should be pretty straightforward from there. He puts in the conduit, notifies Ameren after we're done, and then Ameren should come in and put the lights in. The one thing I'm waiting on Ameren is an invoice. Before they can start, they want a copy, I mean, not a copy, they want to submit the invoice and be paid in advance so that they're not left holding the bag on these lights. And that's what we did on the last round of 20 lights. We paid for those in like 2018. Then in 19 put in conduits, and then in 19 and in 20, you know, 2020, that's when the lights actually were put in place. So that's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any questions on that one. And then switching gears over to York Village, we did have the trustees execute the easement for York Hills Drive. So we have those 2 easements prepared and ready, or executed, I should say. And then today we took the contents out of the box, fit everything together, put the template together for the bolt pattern. And then long story short, we plan on doing the foundations this week for those 2 lights. And then once those 2 lights cure over the weekend, then we figured next week we'd come in, put those 2 lights up. That way you actually have 2 lights that you can see in action, you know, and then we'll pursue the other 2 to 3 to get them to sign off on it, since they'll actually have an actual example to see of the actual street light that's going in.
Good.
So that's where we're at with those 2. And then we've got other reports later on in the agenda.
Okay. Any questions for Dan on those items? Pat?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Dan for the work he did in Brentwood Forest. And since this will be my last public service meeting, public safety meeting, I just wanted to thank him. That's all.
Oh yeah, thanks.
All right, I see it. No other questions. We'll move on to Chief Spees in the Police Department.
Thank you, sir. A couple of things about crime in the last couple of weeks. Just to note, we've had an uptick in vehicle crime, which included one case where somebody left a gun in their car again, so another firearm stolen out of a vehicle. Some of these cases have happened at night in our neighborhoods, and several of them have happened in our retail areas during the day. So that pattern still is consistent. Our retail thefts have increased over the last 30 days. The Target, Ulta, and Home Depot are the most likely targets, and that continues as well. We had a nice armed robbery cleanup. A guy named Joman Williams was arrested and charged with a federal crime of carjacking from a case in Brentwood where a lady was carjacked at our shell lot down on Manchester Avenue. And detectives did a really nice job on the follow-up and got warrants issued. And that guy's currently in custody with the feds, so that was a good case. Our hiring process is coming along. We're getting ready to wrap up applicants. We'll be looking to do interviews after that. Same way with our promotional process in the police department. We're hoping to make 2 promotions here in the near future. The chief's interview process is in the next couple of days, so, and then we'll move on from that. The last thing on this side of the report, Hattie Carmen, I mentioned to you last meeting. We anticipate that Hattie's going out on a medical disability. Her last doctor's appointment for review is tomorrow. So depending on what that doctor says, we will probably be asking to convene the police and fire pension to review Hattie's case and make a decision on her status. So it looks strongly like we'll be losing Hattie here in the next few weeks at least. So that's all I had, sir. Everything else is on the later reports.
Any questions for the chief? Seeing none. Yeah, thanks Sergeant Jason Simpson on that apprehension. That was good work.
I will.
The agenda, so we'll move on to old business. And Chief Cottrell, you're back up with the RFP for the ballistic vest.
Okay, thank you. So bringing forward the replacement of our ballistic protection for the fire department personnel. A little bit of background. Lessons we've learned over the last 5 years of having this equipment, the needs for us to wear it, how we wear it, and then the number of vests that we carry. So in the fire service, our current operating guideline is in civil unrest, we wear our turnout firefighting coat on the outside of our ballistic protection. With our current equipment, that's just not feasible. It's not possible. They're so bulky and weigh so much. So our intent was to come in with a slightly different product to allow for that to occur, but also to shave weight off of this vest. So what I've proposed before you, we're going from slightly 32 pounds per unit to 15 pounds per unit. So that's a significant decrease in what our personnel will be wearing. And then the second piece is the number of units. So during times of civil unrest or just periods when we have to call in extra personnel because of heavy call loads, we don't have enough vests. So we've increased it to 12 so that we can cover all of our personnel if we have to man it at one time. So we budgeted $25,000 in the capital improvement budget. Crew members wrote the specifications and the bids came back at a very wide range, with the lowest bid not meeting the specification. And for reasons stated, I am asking for approval for the highest bid. The fact being, I think it is the best qualified bid. It gives us the highest level of protection at the greatest area on all of our personnel at the lightest weight possible. So with those reasons, I'm asking for approval of the purchase of $21,189.
Questions for the chief? Anybody? Chief, so the other ones, I mean, I don't know what's the service life on these, and do they vary, you know, among these different providers?
No, so that, I mean, that's a great question. It's 5 years. These vests are rated for 5 years. And they're not tested beyond that, regardless of the manufacturer. So that's the standards right now, the national standards on these vests.
Other questions? I'll entertain a motion to forward on to the board the chief's recommendations.
I move that we go ahead and get them.
Second.
Second. I've got a first by Alderwoman Ebling and seconded by Alderwoman Sims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
One opposed? All right. Thank you, Chief. Move on to the Mcknight Road Speed Cushion Program. Dan, I believe you have this one.
I do. Thanks. This is the conclusion that we were all waiting for. So Ladue met with their Public Works Committee, and, initially they had tabled it, but they met in April, just a few weeks ago. And then they gave me reasons why they did not support it. So in the memo, you'll see, several concerns that they had, which I kind of thought they would. I thought the same thing as far as if you put it down, and these are pretty big, because of the speed being 30 miles per hour there, to slow everyone down, these would be 21 feet in length and about 6 feet in width. And we were talking about putting them on both sides of the crosswalk that's at Sonora. So you'd have two of these segments, both north and south of the crosswalk. And if you were to lift those up during the winter, because it would be pretty difficult to clean in between them, well, now you have all these exposed holes. So their concern was, what do you do with the holes? These anchor sleeves are 7-8 inches deep in the asphalt, and there's roughly 650 of them in total with the two segments. So you would have to somehow either grout them in and then chase the threads in the spring, or fill them with some sort of foam and cut that out. So they weren't real thrilled about that. And then some of the other things would be like the criteria for trying to try this out. It's not ideal since the speed limit's 30, and typically you don't do them above 25 mile per hour streets. They're worried about the longevity, since there's roughly 20,000 vehicles per day. How long would these things last? If you put it down, is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? And then as far as some of the other stuff, they're kind of minor as far as like what they actually look like, the appearance, aesthetics. We already mentioned durability, and then the cost. We were looking at, somewhere upwards of 17,000 just for materials. And then of course our labor to put them in from both Ladue and Brentwood. So that's pretty much it. I don't know if you have any questions, but they do not support it is the short answer.
Questions for Dan? Dan, do you pretty well agree with, or do you have some objections to their findings?
No, and we can't really do a half solution there either. I mean,
Yep.
If you don't do all of it, you do none of it. So I would say you put this with the file, with the other information that we'd looked at there. And if something new changes, well, then we'll take a look at it again. They did give us their traffic data, on Mcknight southbound, as well as westbound Litzinger, to give us a baseline. So that's useful in case we need that later. And I ran our collector and saw that it is basically what they're saying. We're looking at 16, 17,000 vehicles per day during COVID. I can't expect it to stay that low. It's going to go upwards once we return to normal, whenever that is.
Bull, I guess we just let this die, huh?
That's correct.
All right, if there's no other questions, we will move on to item C. Dan, I think this is still you, the Rosalie traffic calming.
Yes. So the last item was bad news. This one's good news, I guess. So end on a high note. Rosalie, I know we talked about before doing some traffic calming there. We did data collection a while back. We took a look at what we could do there based on the geometry of the street. So I'd sketched something up, sent it over to TAPCO. TAPCO's the vendor that we used for the pilot program Speed Cushion over on Pine near Hatton. They came back, put together the drawing based on what I had with some modifications. So looking at 3 panels similar to what we did on Pine, each of these would be like 6 feet by 7 feet and spaced out such that the pumper truck could go through there just like on Pine and still leave you like a 1 foot buffer between the edge of the speed cushion and the curb face. And the total on that's just under, I want to say 3,700.
Yeah.
3,700. So we routed a capital request to make the purchase, got approval, and placed the order. So whenever that comes in, we'll figure out a time to put it down. We were wanting to wait until after construction, since MSD is going to do work there as well as ourselves when we do the sidewalk. But since it's a little further east, we could put it down and take it back up just so it doesn't get damaged. And I'm not sure when MSD is going to do the construction. They said this year. So, these are fairly small. We could take them up just to avoid any damage, or we could put it up afterwards. But I at least wanted to have the material in hand. I don't want to wait another 6 or 8 weeks, which is pretty typical for shipping. So we will be getting these probably end of May, and we'll have them on hand since that was all supported on that particular street.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
Questions for Dan on that item? I see none. All right. Item D is police department's recruiting policy. I think we kind of hit on this last meeting, and the chief was to come back with a policy. And it's actually, I believe, going through Ways and Means, but I thought we'd hear the policy and at least maybe throw our support or non-support behind it, whatever it may be. So, Chief?
Thank you, sir. The first thing on this was Jason Coates was requested by BOLA to do a review of the fire department's use of an ordinance regarding hiring somebody in the fire academy. So we kind of modeled what we were doing off of what the fire department did in this regard. Basically, it would allow the police department to look at someone that's in an accredited academy and then hire that person as they go through the academy process. The value to doing this is that the best and the brightest of the recruits in these academy classes typically go very quickly. So we could, as we go look at the hiring process, we would be able to, I would use the word, I guess, cherry pick the best out of those groups and be able to offer them a job and bring them on board while they're in the academy and then onboard them when they graduate, as long as they graduate. All that's in the attached memo that Jason did in terms of what's required of the recruit to sign with the city as conditional employment.
Jason, did you have anything to add to the policy?
No, it's pretty much as the chief had indicated. All I'm looking for at this point would be a motion for this committee to allow this particular item to move forward to Ways and Means. And then we already have an item that had been approved by Ways and Means to modify the handbook. I generally like to modify the handbook when I have several items together. So we're getting close to that point now, but once the full board approves the information contained therein, then we'd be able to implement it.
Steve, I make the motion that we forward this on with approval to the Ways and Means Committee so that it could be voted on by that committee and later, I think, by the full board for inclusion and changes in the manual.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Hey, Chief, I don't know where this is at, but there's an HB bill 295 by Lane Roberts. It's called the Peace Officers Basic Training Tuition Reimbursement Fund.
Okay.
And I think it's I haven't grasped all of it, but there's some type of fund that's going to be made available by the General Assembly for reimbursement to municipalities, I believe, for that pay for the academy costs, tuition costs.
Okay.
So you may want to check into that. I don't know where it's at.
We'll take a look at it.
All right. Move on to another police item, department staffing. Chief?
Yes, sir. So included in the PD's memo that was prepared by Major Hawkins and forwarded to me and then on to BOLA is attached to this discussion. In the beginning of the year, there was the board allowed for the hiring or paying an additional or 29th officer for the police department. As we enter May, Major Hawkins and I have discussed this at length, and at this point, we would ask that you at least consider the potential of hiring a 29th officer. And in this memo, Angie has laid out what the need is and how we would use that 29th officer. As a bit of background, the CPSM study from a couple of years ago was very clear that the retail areas of the city of Brentwood were something that we needed to pay attention to better. As we're staffed, it's a real challenge for us to do that. We were able to have Hattie Carmen do that for the last few months and prior to her injury, and it was a very successful program in our retail areas. The other piece to this, if you've read the memo, is that we are challenged in Brentwood, like all areas of law enforcement, with these traffic issues that come from our citizens. And they're important to us and important to the city. So this additional officer would have a dual role, if it's allowed, of both traffic and doing our retail areas. So it would fulfill the what I consider very vital roles in our police department and the services to our city. The retail areas in other cities, and just as an example, there were 6 officers assigned to the mall area in Richmond Heights at the Galleria. That's just an example. Maplewood additionally has people in their retail areas assigned there. So this would give us an opportunity to actually assign an officer as a liaison to retail, and also do our traffic initiation of all the details and requests that we get from our citizens. The last piece of it, as they would pay attention to our parks as well. We do off-duty rides on bikes and walks in our parks as an overtime process, but that would also be part of this officer responsibility. So this memorandum, along with the hiring of a officer or a recruit in the academy, also is requesting that the Public Safety Committee consider the addition of a 29th officer for those duties and assignments that I just described to you.
Any questions for the chief? I think once again, sorry to pile on to you, Sonny, but I believe this is kind of going to wind its way through Ways and Means. But Chief, I just got a couple of questions. When I look at the budget, I'm not quite following this 28th to 29th officer. I know you've got 1 civilian, but didn't we approve for that 55,000 another officer at the time we amended the budget earlier this year?
I believe the recommendation was that the board consider, yes, it was budgeted, and Bola probably can do this better than me. If you want to jump in, Bola. I think the money was set aside, but not authorized for hire until you approved it. That was my understanding.
That's correct. The 55,000 does not represent a full year. I believe it represents half a year, so that would be effective July.
Yeah, but I thought that 55 was a full year for a patrolman. I mean, isn't that the starting pay for a patrolman?
Give us a quick minute to confirm that. So I'm looking at the pay schedule.
Our current starting rate of pay is 57,000 and change.
57,084, yeah.
And I think that number, I believe that number also includes benefits and the total cost of that officer is really where that number came from.
Right.
And okay, so that would be a patrolman. That's not filling Hattie's spot, right?
No, sir. That would be the additional, the 29th spot. Yes, that's correct.
All right, and then how Hattie's replacement, is that coming from within, or how would that work?
So that's the hiring process that we're in now. That takes a while for us to establish a process and then interview and finally hire somebody. So we started that process anticipating that Hattie's going out on retirement, which that's apparently where we're headed. So that the current hiring process would be to replace her spot. So that would be a spot that's already approved, so to speak. This spot would be, out of that hiring process, will be a 29th position of a police officer.
Okay. And then the 30th personnel, that's the analyst, Tom.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then how come, why is patrolling our parks overtime? That's not able to be incorporated into the regular deployment?
So one of the factors there is that often the officers that are riding the parks are on bikes. So it becomes a bit of a challenge to, they have to come in and shower, change their uniforms, and things like that afterwards. So that's one of the reasons that we like to do it on overtime. The other factor is that they're required to ride all our streets still here in Brentwood. So that the actual vehicle patrol of our city takes quite a while in their shifts. So we built in the park patrols as an overtime patrol for the opportunity for the officers to come into the parks and ride their bikes. Mainly that's what they use it for.
And that couldn't be dedicated to maybe the RSO since summertime, the schools aren't available?
Yeah, it could. He's not bike trained. The SRO is not a bike trained officer, but
All right.
during the summer, he actually gets loaded up with his vacation because he doesn't take hardly any time off during the school year. So we end up losing Officer Figs quite a lot in the summer because of that. And then the other piece that he often is asked to do is move around the different squads because that's the time when officers are taking their vacations, and he plugs holes for us in time as well. So in the heavy vacation time of the year for us, we often use Figsy to jump in there as well.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief? And I believe this is over at some point going to be going to Ways and Means, Paula?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. I'm looking at the budget book, and it
Sure.
says that the position will be vetted through the Public Safety Committee as well as the Ways and Means.
So does that mean that you want some sort of a motion up or down as to whether it should go to Ways and Means with the approval or the disapproval of the Public Safety Committee? Bola, when you say vetted, is that what you meant?
I believe so, yes.
I'd make a motion that we approve for consideration by Ways and Means the hiring of an additional officer within the budget constraints that were previously described.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All right. Chief, we kind of talked about the nighttime staffing. If you showed us some video last month and you were going to come back with a program regarding the nighttime task force.
Yes, sir. Regarding your direction to do that, we've attached a memorandum that details how we would use these additional officers for a nighttime task force. This is, I won't beat a dead horse. This is a continuing problem. We've got additional videos that we can show you just from the last couple of weeks of some really scary incidents. So this is not going away. However, when we really started looking at what we can do in the city of Brentwood to affect it strongly, we could put additional 4 officers on our night watch, which is what we talked about last meeting. This memorandum that's prepared kind of lays that out in terms of what the officers would do, what their duties would be. I would like to direct your attention to the second page in the first paragraph under operation considerations that one of the primary things that we're most concerned with here is that you as the elected officials and our city administrator, and we talk to Bola about this frequently, but that all of us are on the same page in terms of the volatility of doing an operation like this. We can add 4 night watch officers, and we can send our officers out to locate and try to stop these guys. They're not going to stop. They're going to have to be spiked in order to get them. All of these things are going to lead to a final confrontation when they're arrested. These guys are not giving up easily. They're going to run or fight their way out of the situation that we put them into when we try to stop them. So I think it's important that all of us are fully educated and aware of what potentially could happen. These could be flashpoint events at the point that our officers spike these cars or get the car to stop finally. So I think we have to really think our way through what we do today, and that is we send our night watch out to patrol the city with special attention in particular areas that we know are being affected by car break-ins by these guys. We direct them to try and stop them, and when they run, when they get to the city limits, we typically let them go, and that's really what our defense is at this point. We can discuss how effective and ineffective that is. I would tell you it's ineffective for them. Mostly they're going to come back and return. It's part of the fun and the games for these guys to run from the police. So the real challenge here and the real thing to think your way through is what happens if we have one of our Brentwood residents that are seriously injured in one of these confrontations in their driveway or in their kitchen, because these guys are now making a habit of actually going into people's houses with their garage door openers. So this is not an easy thing to weigh. Honestly, this gives us a lot of heartache here as the command in the building. We understand that we are charged with protecting the citizens of Brentwood at 4 in the morning in their driveways. At the same time, we also know that we have a responsibility to the city to police as smart as possible. So what we really want to do with this memorandum is give it to you as you directed, give it to you, and make you, all of you as elected officials, fully aware of just how volatile this is that we did it. And that's really what the memo does. Alderman Lockmiller really lays out what we would do with these 4 additional officers and what its value is and what the backside dangers are to both our police officers and any kind of confrontation that could happen on the backside of this.
Okay. Questions for the chief? For chief? I mean, we're looking at, I've been watching the Ways and Means meetings, and you know, if depending on what philosophy we end up settling on, and some parity between fire department and police department, EMTs, and I mean, we're looking at anywhere an additional payroll of 72,000 to up to 274,000. In just those talks, there's chatter about going to a 95th percentile, and then we've got 4 more officers at $380,000. Where, any idea where that revenue, what revenue do you tap if all this comes together?
I would tell you that this is from our perspective. We're not asking you to hire 4 additional people for this night watch. I think this is a byproduct of you asking to give a report of what we would do with 4 additional officers. And I think this is a very complicated issue. At this point, quite frankly, I don't know which one is more dangerous. Leaving these guys in the driveways at 4 in the morning or putting 4 additional policemen out here to challenge them. So I don't want to be misrepresented here that we're asking for 4 additional policemen for a night watch detail. Honestly, I think this is something that we probably should consider really thinking our way through moving forward. It's that dangerous to our officers. It's that dangerous to the city generally if something happens here. So with the conditions of law enforcement generally in the world today, we could be creating a situation where we're going to cause a lot of problems for this city if we really force this issue, because there's a high probability of a violent confrontation with our officers. So my recommendation is you ask for the report on what we would do. I would say, from my perspective, I think this is something that we should consider to keep talking about. But we're certainly not at this point from the police side asking you to consider hiring 4 officers at this time. We simply want to educate you as the board and elected officials as much as we can on the issue. But I would tell you that this is a real dangerous thing to do at this point. there may come a time when we come back to you and say, hey, look, we can do something about nighttime crime, and we can. Be confident in knowing that if we did this, it's going to affect your nighttime crime. So it's just, at this point, I just don't know in the world today if this is a good choice.
What about, we know when this occurs, late evenings to early morning. We know what parts of the city it's occurring in. I mean, is there a way to piece together a task force? Well, I don't want to say piece together, but with our current officers using overtime to put together some type of squad over the summer, just to see if how effective it would be?
The overtime piece is going to be a challenge. I mean, quite frankly, nobody really wants to come to work at 2 in the morning and work from 2 to 6. It's a real challenge getting anybody to volunteer for that shift.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of discussions with our neighboring departments about doing some version of a task force. And quite frankly, it zeroes in on the same issues. What happens when we catch them? It's that same conversation about the volatility of this is the same thing that we talk about with Clayton, Richmond Heights, Maplewood, and Ladue chiefs of police. So yeah, we can continue those conversations as well with the other cities. But I think we're gonna have to think our way through long and hard about what does that take? What are we challenging that group of officers to do? What are our specific instructions and what do we want done? Because they'll do whatever we ask them to do. If we want to set up spike teams and we want to go after these guys and lock them up for their crimes, they're in, they'll do it. But as a city and as the people that are, I really take to heart our responsibility as the police command, and I know all of you do as elected officials. Thinking our way through this is real important. This is something that could end up in all kinds of bad things like protests and lawsuits, things that really, as we put pressure on this and really force the issue, I don't know how those things won't happen eventually.
Yeah. What about, I know Wentzville's been kind of dealing with this and they've used some technology, some cameras. I mean, is any of that a possibility?
Yeah, Wentzville, the chief of police in St. Charles County is a good friend of mine, and I talked at length with him about what they're doing. They're using LPR cameras, which are simply the same thing we have. We have LPR capacity here in Brentwood as well. They're looking for stolen cars, vehicles that are wanted for felonies. They're setting up on the 2 bridges going back into St. Louis, because what happens is when they jump these guys, that's the 2. Similar for us, Highway 64 and Highway 170 are the areas that they flee most frequently out of Brentwood. For that area, that's what they're setting up on those bridges, and they're spiking these guys. And they've made the decision that they're willing to take whatever risks on the backside of it, and they'll tell you that. That's they have a lot of officers out there trying to affect it, and they, nearly every one of the cars that they've tried to stop has run. They've had some accidents. Thankfully, at this point, they haven't had any real violent confrontations with the guys that they've stopped. But what we would be doing would probably be very close to what St. Charles County and City are doing right now and the other jurisdictions out there. The technology you're referring to, though, is the LPR cameras. That's what they're using.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief? I see none. I guess it's just be an ongoing discussion and things to look into, Chief. I appreciate you putting the report together.
Yes, sir. And we'll, as part of the ongoing report from the police department on a monthly basis, we always pay very close attention to this nighttime crime issue anyway. So we'll make sure that you're up to date on the incidents we have moving forward.
I had one more thing. Bola, you put out an email regarding Slate and pursuits. I think we were under the impression that Slate did not permit pursuits, but I guess under the guise of a felony, committing of a felony, they do?
They do, that is correct.
Okay. What's your take on that, Chief?
Our policy is even more restricted than just felonies, where it has to have the tie of a violent felony or potential violence. So it's even more restrictive than just a straight up felony, which may be something like a felony theft or a fraud case could be a felony. Our pursuit policy is much further restrictive, and it has to be a crime of violence. So a carjacking, for example, an armed robbery event, we will chase that car. But for just a felony, a non-violent felony, we will not chase.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Move on to new business. Dan, we've got the Pine Avenue traffic calming request.
In your packet, I tried to include the different reports that I run, but just backing up a moment, we received a request from a resident, 9134 Pine Avenue, on April 5th. On April 7th, I contacted them. They submitted the petition that's required per the program, so checked all the boxes. They had everything. And the concern was regarding speeds, volume, and cut-through traffic in that 9100 block of Pine. So we set up the data collector. It ran from April 16th through April 23rd. It actually still ran a few more days before the battery went out, but to get data to you before this meeting, I just did a query from the 16th through the 23rd of April. So looking at the various reports, the traffic analysis report is kind of an executive summary of all the various more detailed reports. So looking at that, the posted speed limit's 20 miles per hour. The 85th percentile speed's 25 miles per hour. So that means 85% of the cars that are going through there are doing 25 miles per hour or less. The 50th percentile speed's 21 miles per hour. Same idea. 50% of the cars are doing 21 or less. So the average speed, when it sums everything up, is 20.8 miles per hour. So the average is, just barely over the posted speed limit. There were, outliers, just like with anything. So whenever you look at the raw data, there was a max speed of 57 miles per hour and a min speed of 12 miles per hour. The data collector's good to within plus minus 1 mile per hour. So it's pretty accurate. And as I mentioned, it was set up for an 8-day collection period, 5,421 vehicles. So what I'm getting at with the various volumes in that is, when you look at the volumes per day, the average daily traffic, which is the ADT, you're only looking at in the 600s, like mid 600s as far as volume. So why do I want to look at that? To see if there's a high volume, since that's what one of the concerns was. When we look at quantities of vehicles on weekdays and weekends, that might indicate if there's a cut through problem. So if I see a high number on the 5-day, which is Monday through Friday, versus the Saturday, Sunday, which would be much lower, that to me would indicate that there's a lot of people driving through there just during the work week, and there isn't. It's pretty close between Monday through Friday and Saturday, Sunday. And then when I look at the volumes and put that with respect to where we've already done the data collection, Rosalie was way over 1,000 vehicles a day for that block between Swim Club and Brentwood Boulevard. Other values for volumes that were recorded in 2021, about 800 vehicles per day at 8928 Pine, and then 830 vehicles per day at 9347 Pine. So, going at the east and west ends of Pine, you see a difference there. Annalee only about 470 vehicles per day between Madge and Litzinger. And then you see like the large volumes, which would be like your Strassner, 4,840 vehicles per day, Strassner near Memorial Park. But I believe due to COVID, you're seeing lower volumes just because people stay at home. Kids are homeschooled, I guess, to some degree. In March of 2018, the traffic analysis report showed around 950 vehicles per day at that same 9347 Pine. So the same exact spot on 9347 Pine, there was more than 120 vehicles more, a little over 2 years ago. So volume's not always a great thing to look at during COVID, because you may be getting, a false read. Then switching gears to speed, when you look at that traffic analysis report, I look at the way it's broken down by day and the different headings, like the over the threshold. Well, what does that mean? It gives you a quantity of cars in a percent that are going 10 miles per hour or greater over the posted speed limit. So with the posted speed limit at 20, I can get the filters to run when it hits 31 miles per hour and up. If you're 30 or less, you haven't gone over that predetermined threshold that I put in there. So looking at that information from that standpoint, most of the speed violations are actually on the weekend, which I would tend to believe that's the people that live there, not necessarily, well, it could be, I guess, people doing business in the area, but there's really no businesses there. It's residential. So quantity wise, you'll see, 14 or so cars on Sunday, 18 on Saturday, and that represents the higher fraction of 2.4%. Average violator speeds in the low 30s. Looking at the class counts, that's just the size of the vehicles. Most everything is small to medium, which is what you would expect. There's really no large trucks, except occasionally, that's like 2.2% of the total, which is over 5,400 cars. So don't really see any issues there. And then there's other reports you can run. So I did run like a speed by direction. So what that tells me is how many cars go through there by hour, whether eastbound or westbound. And it looks like there's only about 17 vehicles per hour in a 24-hour period. During the morning hours, hardly anybody drives through there. You see a peak, from that 8 to 9 a.m. hour, and then it tapers off rapidly, and then you don't see a peak again until the afternoon when people start coming home, or after school for that matter. The enforcement priorities report, that tells me where law enforcement might consider issues. Again, the data is kind of indicating Saturday and Sunday dates are most prevalent days for speeders, which is the same as what the traffic analysis report pointed to. The average number of violators is fairly small, and only like 3 vehicles within an hour for a given quantity of vehicles. And then regarding, there's a compliance and risk report. That little color-coded thing, it tells you, is there a high risk? That would be where the speed relation comes in. And almost everything, there doesn't seem to be any indication of high risk behavior. Almost all the behaviors are either compliant or medium risk, meaning that they're not going more than 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. And then it also told me the same thing, that you see a peak around 8 a.m. of vehicles traveling, and then it dwindles rapidly and doesn't pick up again until 3 to 5 p.m. So from, again, law enforcement, if you're going to try to pick people off for certain violations, it's probably more than likely in the wee hours of the morning, like 7, 8 a.m., and then in the afternoon as people return. So with all that said, I wasn't really able to, I was able to confirm that I don't believe that there's a speed issue. It's pretty close to the posted speed limit. When I look at the traffic calming program, typically you don't see a trigger until you're 5 miles per hour over the 85th percentile, like more than 5. We're like right at 5, so you're right on the bubble there. If you saw 85th percentile speed like we did on Pine, where the speed cushion is, I looked up that one, it was at 28 miles per hour, so it was 8 over, and then some of the other things I looked at as far as the violator speeds, you're in the low 30s, which again, it is posted at 20, so that is speeding, but in the block further west of there, it was much higher. So I guess what I'm saying is, under the recommendation, is based on the initial data collected, there doesn't seem to be strong evidence indicating speed conditions are exceeded on a routine basis. And I'm not recommending installation of anything at this time in that 9100 block. And then, as I mentioned at the tail end of that, due to COVID and the fact that there's construction in that block. So there are contractors with trucks, trailers, that might be a natural traffic calming device, because the road kind of narrows as the truck and trailers stick out a little bit more. Maybe people aren't speeding as much through there. So it'd probably be, beneficial to take another group of readings after everyone clears out and it's more pristine to what it should be, a more natural 9100 block and not the way it is now. So I know that's a lot to go over. I don't know if you have any specific questions about any of the little reports.
Can I?
David? Go ahead, David.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just, it was not so much a question as it was just to follow up on the last thing you said. If the data was borderline, you know, or perhaps on the bubble, and as you point out, there's a couple of factors that might lead us to conclude that it's artificially low, and maybe just temporarily artificially low. Are you thinking that would you want us as a board or as a committee to revisit this in the summertime, or when are you thinking that we might ask you to collect this data all over again? And how expensive a process is it to collect the data?
Oh, we own the data collectors and we pay a subscription for the software. It's on an annual basis. So it's just a matter of us going back out and putting the devices in the same spots, which we could. They were on utility poles. And then I can do it's just my time of running the filters. It's not a big deal. I've done it before. So I guess I'll have to check with planning and development because I'm not sure when the construction in that block is going to be done. But that, I would say whenever that winds down, that would be probably the ideal time to set up shop again.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Randy. I'll let you.
Thanks. I had one question. Well, probably my first comment, the time frame, I guess you did the study. I don't think we could have had any more construction traffic on our block. The house right next door to me, 9140, just closed yesterday. And so if you go back about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and I think that falls within your study, the crunch was on to get this house done, and there was a much more construction traffic than normal. And I do believe over the last 8 months, people have tried to avoid our street because of the construction traffic. Now, the other suggestion I might make as far as doing another, they're starting a tear down at 9130 Pine Avenue on the other side of us beginning in 2 weeks. So we're going to have another 8 months of construction on our block. But, you know, with COVID, the construction, all the construction trailers, it has slowed things down on our block. I've lived here 37 years. It's crazy. I mean, just from living here and seeing people yelling at cars, there's a lot going on. But I hope you do another study. And I guess if you're going to do it, we might want to wait a while because we're going to have more construction starting up in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. It's good to know.
I know we desperately need it, but if we need to get the data, we may have to wait because it's going to be the same situation with all the construction until they're done at 9130 Pine. So,
Dan, do you see any problem with revisiting this maybe after those homes are built?
No, that'd be fine. Yeah, because I wouldn't want to run it again in the summer just because when school's out, then there's going to be less traffic. So if you were worried about volume and that, you're not going to see it there either. It's like you have to kind of pick when, and as you get more data, it should kind of flatten out where you see some anomalies and then you start to see the patterns. But because I did visit it, I did notice, as Mr. Delo mentioned, that there's quite a bit of construction there. And I thought, well, if I lived on one of the side streets or one of these other streets, that parallels it, I would avoid it. I just cut over to White or something until they're done, and it's easier to traverse White than it is Pine, and still get you to Mcknight or wherever you're going, east or west.
Right. Well,
thanks.
I guess we should probably just put it on hold until things open up. I mean, if you got volume is volume. I think the request is mainly speed.
Right.
And no matter whether you have 400 or 900, you're still going to have, if there's a speed issue, there's still an issue, right?
Yeah,
The
because
volume.
the
doesn't
volume,
play
right? I mean, the volume, you're going to see a reduction because of COVID, but of the cars that are traveling, say it's 650 in a day, are they able to speed? And the answer may be no, because they're kind of restricted with other stuff going on. Once you lift that restriction, then you may see the speed increase. The area of Pine to the west of there, where it's closer to Hatton, that's much wider. And even though there is parking on the side street, people were able to get up much greater speeds. And especially once they cleared the stop sign, there was no other stop. There isn't no stop for east or westbound at Hatton on that stretch of Pine until you get to Mcknight and then further east of there.
David, this is your ward, David. What do you want to make a recommendation?
Yeah, I took to heart Randy's comments, and thanks for giving him the opportunity to speak. I think he's probably got a point. And if that means that we wait until the fall when school's back in session and perhaps COVID is more of a memory, and we're back to some more typical driving patterns, that we revisit this in the fall and see what's what at that point.
Okay. Any other committee members have any concerns regarding waiting? I'm not seeing any. So Dan, I guess you have your direction.
Yeah, I'll just block it out on the calendar to go ahead and set something up for fall.
Okay.
Chairman, Mayor Dimmitt has his hand raised.
David? Mayor? You there?
Yeah, hey, thank you. I'm not calling in as the mayor. I'm calling in as a resident on Pine, and I couldn't agree more with Randy than what he said. I think he's absolutely correct. I've lived this as well. Randy and Sandy have lived on Pine since for a very, very long time, and while it's anecdotal doesn't mean that it's untrue. And there's no question in my mind that the amount of traffic has increased over the years. The speeding has increased, even with the speed humps tables that we've installed on Pine over closer to Mcknight. And so I appreciate this, the committee's decision to go ahead and maybe look at this later, but I think it absolutely has to be done after the second house is finished being constructed on Pine, because that's a great point that Randy raised. That's a real problem that naturally is going to cause a slowdown in traffic. It's going to cause a diversion in traffic. People are going to avoid Pine, and so we're not getting a true read on Pine, and it continues to be a problem. I hear from folks not just on the west of me, but to the people on the east of me. That's another big problem. And at the end of the day, it's all cut through traffic. So I just want to echo the comments of Randy. And so thank you to the committee for agreeing to look at this at a later date.
Thank you. All right. We shall move on to the next traffic comment request is on Harrison Avenue. Dan?
Yes, in your packet, you'll see in there just a brief write-up on this one. We just received this April 17th and contacted the resident April 19th, and the person came back with additional signatures. The concern here, or at least I'm looking at the report, is that High School is the primary street of concern between Litzinger and White, and the new McGrath would do or what it would do to High School, because if you recall, the new McGrath will have an egress on High School and the ingress will be on St. Clair. So it'll dump more traffic in the afternoons whenever there's pickups. What we don't know is what that true number is, because of course this has not occurred yet, the improvements at McGrath. What I had recommended, or what I believe we should do, is put the traffic counter on High School to get a baseline and figure out what exactly is happening there now. Is there a lot of volume? Because some of the boxes that are checked would be speeds, volume, pedestrian crossing, pretty much anything and everything. But the data collector will be able to tell you your speed, your volume issues, just like we did on Pine that we just talked about. I can't speak intelligently about what's going on there now because we don't know what's going on. Same thing with Harrison. We have 2 counters, so we could put them up simultaneously at both Harrison and high school, develop a baseline, and then try to figure something out once the school is closer to constructed. And I believe they're going to have a crossing guard there too. I believe when we attended the last meeting, I think they're going to have some improvements on that east side of the school, on the high school side.
Yeah, I think you're right, Dan. I think they're going to have some personnel doing more than just being up there at Litzinger in high school. Well, that sounds like a plan to me. Anything else for Dan on that one? Start with the baseline. Okay. Sounds like a plan. Dan, I think afterwards, I think when they get that crossing signal up, when all this is completed, and if we can enhance the signage around the school zones there, I think this will help somewhat with some of this traffic calming, but I think it's a good idea to get that baseline going first.
Yeah, I'll look at the thermoplastic because they do make stencils that you just basically melt onto the asphalt that says school. The reflectorized, it's a vinyl type material. So, we can get a cost on that and figure out, we could add that, upstream and downstream of the crosswalk, just so that people that aren't familiar with the area know that there's a school there. There's signage up, but, if you're looking at the road like you should be when you're driving, maybe you'll see that instead of the sign that's off to your right.
Yeah, the sign is just a black and white sign that says school zone. And if you look at those pictures I sent of Avery along Marshall Road, I think we could, I don't know what it takes to create a school zone. I don't know what the length of the school zone is there right now, but I think some of the surrounding streets around the schools maybe could become school zones. I don't know. We're going to dump that all in your lap and we're going to come up with something as traffic engineer. So,
yeah, and some of those signs, as you pointed out, they're a different yellow. They're the high visibility yellow. So those are the ones that you reserve for like school zones and areas of concern. The ones that are a duller yellow, like an amber color, those could be, warning signs elsewhere. So we could get different sign stock and replace the signs that are there with the high visibility ones. That's pretty low impact cost improvement.
Sounds good. Any other things for Dan? Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. It looks like item 10 is citizen comment. Kelly, anybody out there still?
Karen has her hand raised.
Karen Smith, you there?
She needs to unmute.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
So thanks for taking up the Harrison. It's kind of complicated and there's a couple of different moving pieces. So in regards to the current situation on high school, I think it's a great idea to get a baseline. It looks like the cars are speeding to me, but again, I don't, that's anecdotal. So I think it would be great to understand that. I think they definitely don't observe the pedestrian walk. They act like it's not even there, like they even see it. So I know, I don't know if we could do like a push button kind of thing that they have like on Mcknight Road, because with the speeds and you've got, people with strollers, dogs that sometimes might get caught out in the middle there with a car that's moving rather quickly. So I've seen a little bit of that happen quite a bit over the years. And so it's really just not a safe intersection right now. And then on Harrison, because we do park on the street, I don't know that I see too much speeding per se. It's just more the congestion at Harrison and Brentwood and the cut through traffic that we have. But, I guess I'd want to get other neighbors' thoughts around that because they may see something that I don't. So that's kind of the current situation. But then we have the future, which would be this egress from the school's project. And understanding how we can address traffic management that's going to come off of that. And I know at the last Board of Aldermen meeting, there were a couple of suggestions that were made. And I also kind of highlighted some of those in the email that I sent, this morning. It is going to be an egress, and the traffic's just not going to be in the afternoon because they'll be dropping the kids off in the morning. and the afternoon. The school has committed to putting some, a traffic person there to help mitigate that, but they do after school activities, weekend activities. That school has a lot of activities that go on there. So there would be other traffic times. There'd be other times when there would be increased traffic into the area. And so kind of trying to help understand how we're gonna move the traffic through the area would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Kelly, anyone else?
That's it at this time.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. See you Monday.
Bye-bye.
Hey.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you for letting me know, Kelly,
Oh, no problem.
or reminding me. I didn't know.
Have a good
Thanks.
night.
I'll see you all Monday.
All righty.